just the super quick background. I've been in a corporate job for 26 years, hated my job for the first 15 years. Like hate, I don't use that word
Yeah.
anymore, but that was the word I would have used to describe it. And 85% of people, according to even Gallup, which is pretty mainstream, hate their jobs. So the inception was, how do we escape corporate? So I wrote this book in 2004 called Escape from Corporate, but I never finished writing it because I ended up moving, had kids, and I forgot I even wrote the book until last year. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder how far I got. And so I found it on an external hard drive. I had written 198 pages or something like that.
Oh,
I never finished it. So, but what I had done in the meantime is I created like a corporate environment that I wanted. So I have this whole, I have unlimited vacation. I get paid well, not perfectly well, but well. And then I don't have any bosses. So it's kind of like a really good setup. So we're creating this course called How to Escape Corporate Without Quitting Your Job. And so for people that want to escape, but they're not going to become entrepreneurs. Now you can use the course to be an entrepreneur, but the other side to the course is we created this podcast called Corporate Escape Artists to highlight people that either were never in corporate and kind of evaded the whole thing. And how do they get by? What do they do? What is their mindset, financial stuff that they do, or health focused? And then people that are in corporate that have escaped, and finally people that are in corporate and love their jobs and how did they create that. So that's kind of the three different layers of the podcast. And we want to highlight, mostly in this season, we're highlighting health, and then we want to highlight mindset, and then financial, like how to set yourself up financially to not be stressed and to go after what you want.
for sure.
Yeah.
Good job, you guys.
Thanks, Patricia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So needed. Like 85% of people hate their job. Wow. Wow.
I didn't think it would be that big, but it's like 85% of people are so disconnected at their jobs that they basically aren't even doing anything. They're doing enough to get by and still get a paycheck,
Mm,
but they're like completely disconnected and checked out.
Yeah.
And that's a huge number. So
that's
Well,
it's
huge.
and not living their purpose, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so bringing, you on, we probably already started this podcast, by the way. We're going to be using a lot of this content. So bringing like you on and really showcasing like, well, how come you didn't go into corporate? Why didn't you get degrees? And, like you're living your life purposefully. And that's so missing in, I think, so many different areas in the world. And like, what's your mindset? How did you get there? How did you get yourself there? So those are some of the things that we're going to be, investigating, and we want to hear all the stories in between.
Okay. I have a lot of them.
Yeah.
good.
Yay.
Welcome to another day in the corporate matrix. We're here today with my co-host Heidi and our very special guest, Patricia Loff from Rapid Health Transformation. Like just that word alone leads me to believe this is going to be a really fun conversation. I have heard some things about Patricia that I haven't had the opportunity to hear firsthand, which number one, I really want to dig into at some point during this podcast about whether degrees and certifications help us or actually get in our way of doing really good work, healing people, as well as helping us make a living outside of the corporate matrix. So we all know that corporations tend to push education and certifications. So for a really good example, the corporation that I work for, we were hiring an individual to do some work for us. I was part of that hiring process, and they required a bachelor's degree. But in fact, we knew of somebody that would be a perfect fit for this role, would stick around a long time and do a really phenomenal job. But that person was disqualified because they didn't have a bachelor's degree. I was able to convince the human resources department, we call them human resources, which is odd because we kind of lump everybody into the same place as coal and natural gas as resources to be used up and thrown away when we're done. So let me call it the people services department. I reached out to them and asked them to allow this individual to interview. Even though he didn't meet the qualifications, the department had rejected his resume from even going to the next step. Short story is that he ended up getting hired for the role. And a year and a half later, everyone is so happy that we hired this individual. He's doing so well. He was the perfect fit, and we want to hire someone else just like him. So I do want to dig into that in this podcast. I think it's going to be eye-opening for many people where in the corporate world, we're in the sphere of needing more certifications and more degrees and more training to get what we want, when in fact, that may not be the best path forward. So really looking forward to this conversation where we'll discuss all things health, entrepreneurial, and other areas. That didn't even sound very good. But we're going to discuss all those things. So it's great. You'll get to check in on what Patricia has to say. And this is my first time talking to Patricia and meeting her. So I'm really excited to learn what she's going to say. So thank you, Patricia, for being here today. I'm going to hand it over to Heidi and we'll get this thing kicked off.
All right. So welcome, Patricia, to the podcast. We're so honored to have you. We know you're a very busy human that is like serving a lot of people. So thank you first and foremost for taking the time out of your life to talk with us. And just a little bit of background for you guys. Patricia and I were buddies in our leadership program. So we spent 4 months together, just like barreling through this like intense, crazy leadership thing that we did. And we made it through. Yay. It was not easy. But whenever I speak about you, Patricia, I call you the Qigong master, like amazing ranch healer from Alberta, Canada. And you know, like, it's just such a fun conglomeration of all those things. So why don't you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and maybe formally introduce yourself?
Thank you. And thank you for having me on your podcast. You guys are the best interviewers that I've run across. And I'm doing podcasts just about every week now. So you guys are the most fun so far.
Oh.
So yeah, thank you for having me on. Okay, so my business is Rapid Health Transformation. And the way I got into this business is because I figured out a way to reverse a deadly health condition that I had. About, I think I'm going to say 25 years ago. I don't remember exactly the dates, but I was given 3 to 6 months to live. At the 11th hour, I ran across some information that allowed me to reverse that situation. And then shortly after that, people started to ask me to help them do the same thing. And I was kind of like, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I wanted to go to the symphony and I wanted to travel and I wanted to have a normal life for a change, but I guess that was not in the cards. So
Yeah.
I had to learn how to translate what happened to me internally into words that people could follow and exercises that people could do.
Mhm.
And so then I went to study traditional Chinese medicine so that I could make sure that I was delivering the best information possible. And what I found out really was that what I did was not new. It was just, information that I didn't have before that's been known for 5,000 years. So that's kind of how my business got built, despite all my resistance, I would say.
Nice. Oh, that's beautiful. So Patricia, you also own a ranch and you have, is the ranch a business? I can't remember.
It's not anymore.
Okay.
It used to be when my husband was breeding and commercially doing hay and whatnot, but we don't do that anymore. So
Okay.
it's just a pleasure place now.
Okay.
But still, the workload doesn't seem to decrease.
Yeah. Right. So you still have horses and lots of land and you live in Alberta, Canada.
I do.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
So,
Yeah.
so Patricia, how did you go from like curing your own illness? So you had this like supposedly, irreversible illness or something that required traditional medicine with not very good outcomes, and you're able to solve that for yourself.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you solved it for yourself? And then also, like, how did you go from just doing that for yourself to working with others? Like you said, others were asking you, but like, what did that look like and how did you actually get started?
Okay, so how I did it was I was given some information that was kind of newly minted research at the time from a doctor by the name of Candace Pert. She was a neuroscientist who identified this chemical pathway that we produce in our own bodies just by the way we respond to our everyday lives. So every time we respond to anything, like with thought or emotion, or even if we see something, it produces a chemical in the body. The chemical goes and docks on a cell, drops information into the cell, and tells this that information determines how the cell operates and then replicates. So if we respond negatively, we get negative information to tell the cell how to operate and replicate. So then you can imagine this happening like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times every day. That and we're mostly bent to respond negatively to things just because that's our from our primitive years, we had to watch out for danger so much. So we're still like 10,000 years behind in terms of mental development. Um,
Oh
sorry, but true. And
Yeah.
then, and so if you can imagine that happening tens, if not hundreds of thousands of times every day over the years, how we would end up, how it would be so common that we're sick. And so once I figured out what the nerdy scientific details were, I went, oh my gosh, so what is it? How is it that I'm responding to things? And I started to watch that. And I was just stunned at how negative I was, even though I didn't know it. And so then I started to practice stopping responding in that way. I didn't replace it with responding in a better way, because there's a Buddhist principle that goes behind that. And then what happened is, like, within about 3 weeks, I could feel my body changing. And then I went to have a scan with the doc at the medical center, and it showed that my tumors, that all these tumors that I had in my body hadn't grown since the last scan that I had. I was just like super, super excited. And the doctors were like, that's within the margin of error of the machinery. Yeah. And I was going like, no way, because that's the first time in, years that it showed that it hadn't, boomed forward. So I was super excited. They wanted me to have more surgery. I said, hell no. I'm just gonna plow forward and keep playing with this whole mechanism of responding thing and changing my chemistry. And within about 18 months, I had 0 tumors. I was on no more medication. I've been healthier for the last 25 years than I was the however many years before that, 30 something years before that. And really no diagnoses of anything except, when I break something or have a little cold, and that's about it. And so now if I do go get tested, I go for an annual physical about every 4 years, and the results come back equivalent to someone who's about 30 years younger than I am. So like my bone density is super good. My heart is super good. Everything functions well. They said I would have all these problems with scar tissue from all the surgeries that I had and all the medications I was taking and all that kind of stuff. None of that was true. None of it. So then people started to ask me, like, they see me dying and then they see me running around like a 14-year-old, and they started to say like I want some of that. And people who knew me told people who were in some kind of health trouble about my story, and then they came and started asking me how I did that. And so at the beginning I started, bumbling my way through and helping people for free, but then more people came and more people came and more people came. You can't do that for free, 24 hours a day. So I started to develop programs that people could follow and make it like, step 1, step 2, step 3, instead of me just, bumbling along and spewing out the first thing that came to my head. So that it developed into a program that was, sensible. And then I studied traditional Chinese medicine and refined my process quite a bit since then. So that's kind of how it went.
That my mind is just like, okay, how do I even ask this question? You were talking about 2 things that I was like, wait, something doesn't quite add up. So you're like, okay, so there's this mechanism that you learn about. It's like a scientific mechanism within the body that our thoughts and emotions create information that's transmitted to our cells to tell the cells what to do.
Yep.
Cool. So that I understand, and I got that. I don't know that everybody comprehends that that's a thing the body does, but I think that's really important, right? So
Yeah.
I'd like us to talk about that a little more. Specifically, you said that you changed your thoughts. So you must have in some way been aware, like you had to first become aware of what you were thinking in
Mhm,
order to change them from negative, which you said we have this negative default programming.
mhm.
So that makes sense to me, from the reptilian brain of danger and this default programming. So Patricia, like the other thing that you said was you didn't replace them with positive thoughts, because that's a Buddhist thing. Like that I don't understand. So
Okay.
like how does it work if you, so like I have this negative thought, I totally get it, but shouldn't I be like, oh my God, I'm gonna have this positive thought? So I guess like in my mind, there's polarities, right? So if nothing's like one or the other, and again,
Mhm.
like it's a polarity. It's all part of one thing.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, you can correct me here,
She'll school you. Don't
right.
worry.
So it's like if you've got this negative thing and your body is tipping in this direction of dis-ease, and then you start weighing down on all the positive side, it's just the opposite polarity that weighs the body down in a way that, again, is imbalanced. Is that kind of what you're saying? And like, how do you actually do this in practice?
Okay. Before I got that nugget of information that at the 11th hour that saved my life, I'd been studying Buddhism for about 10 years. And in Buddhism, I mean, you guys know that it's, really the science of the mind and human behavior that makes up Buddhism. And so I did have an awareness about what I was thinking, and I had the tools to make myself even more aware, through meditation and that kind of reveals the subconscious mind. So what the Buddhists practice is of course recognizing your your tendencies or your mental tendencies, which is your mental thoughts. And so when I started to really, kind of put that together with the science, then I started watching my thoughts even with more diligence and noticing all the negative stuff. Now, stopping a negative thought, super easy. You just tell it to stop or tell it no or whatever, and that's the interruption. That right there interrupts the chemical process that follows it. You don't replace it, because when you start watching your thoughts, they come up from the subconscious mind. If you're trying to replace it with a positive thought, it doesn't penetrate back into the subconscious mind, because what planted that subconscious thought in there was paired with a strong emotion typically. And if you're just trying to replace a patterned negative thought that was implanted in the first place with a strong emotion, um, and you're trying to replace it with a positive thought without a strong emotion, without the correct brainwave pattern, then it's going to be doing no good whatsoever. The second part to that is, so you have the conscious mind, which is the smallest part, then you have the analytical mind, then you have the subconscious mind, and then you have what the Buddhists call your true nature. So if you start eliminating your negative thinking, and you don't replace it with something, you're just kind of moving the subconscious mind out of its place of priority, because the mind prioritizes certain things. And when the subconscious mind is pushed out of a priority position, your true nature bubbles forward. And that true nature for everybody is joy, just unadulterated, uncaused joy. And so when your body starts to experience that, you're making chemicals there as well. And those chemicals go to and dock on your cells, on the receptor sites of your cells, and deposit information into your body that elevates the operation of your cells and the replication of your cells. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It's almost making sense. So I have this picture that Bob Proctor always draws for us when we watch his videos. So he's not alive today, but his videos are alive and retain his teachings. And the mind, the model of the mind, you've got the conscious mind, right? So you have the five senses, and they're bringing in this information. And of course, people say the five senses, right? But we know there are more ways of getting information.
Right. Oh, let me see.
So
Yeah.
Heidi's showing something on YouTube that I'm going to describe to those.
Yeah,
So,
I see it.
so Heidi showed this model. You can go back and look at that if you're watching the YouTube version. But if you're not, It's a model. It's like a stick figure model of a human, but it shows the brain, and on the top of the head are these 5 antennas that are said to be the 5 senses. They bring information to the conscious mind. That's the mind, like if we listen, we're aware of these thoughts that we're having, that are coming in. We're aware of sensations, hot, cold, whatever. And so then what Bob Proctor talks about is the conscious mind can direct what goes into the subconscious if we keep out negative things. But what you're saying, Patricia, is no, in fact, below the conscious mind is not the subconscious, it's the analytical mind, where we can take in the sensory information, we can observe it.
No, that's not what she said. She said conscious, analytical, subconscious, and then true nature.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Oh, I thought you
That's what I
said.
just said.
Oh, okay. I thought you said
Yeah.
something. Okay. Sorry.
I've got you, Thaddeus. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I thought you said something different.
So then the conscious mind is taking in these observations essentially. And so your layer under conscious that's different than Bob Proctor's would be before subconscious, we do this analytical reasoning of, do we want to keep some things out that are bubbling up? And some of those things could be coming from the subconscious, is what I'm hearing you say, and some are coming from the external environment.
Yep.
Then we move to the subconscious, and then we have this pure joy of the true nature.
Yeah.
So I love that. I've actually never heard that, and I'm waiting for your book to come out now. So you'll have to tell us when the book comes out. Are you making a book?
Yes, I am. I'm working on it now. Yeah.
Do you have an ebook on your website?
I do. Yeah.
Some of that in there, or does that not have that?
I think it's just very brief.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything else is going to be laid out in the big book and manual and all that. Yeah.
Oh,
this is amazing. So I'm
and
learning,
you
like,
love her.
so when we stop a negative thought, whether it bubbled up from the subconscious, which is what I'm hearing you say, they bubble up from the subconscious from a strong emotion. Something happens, strong emotion is triggered in the subconscious. Consciously, we get this negative thought form that most people aren't stopping to think about. They just have this mind chatter that creates these negative patterns and then transforms our cells in a way that we don't want. When you observe and stop those negative thoughts, so let's just say somebody is now, whether they're meditating or at least they're just paying attention, investing attention, not paying, but investing their attention into what's happening in their own self-talk, and they stop those things. I must have missed what you said. Was it that instead of replacing it, you just stop the thought form and the true nature allows the joy to bubble up? Is that kind of how it's working?
It's kind of like when you stop especially a patterned negative thought, and you don't replace it. So the subconscious mind prioritizes different things based on security, safety, and all the primitive stuff that we have. When you stop that pattern of prioritization, then it's like the the Red Sea parting, if you will. It's like the subconscious mind moves out of the way of its priority programming, and that's what allows the true nature to spring forth. It is unmistakably delicious.
I've studied like the bare like tiny parts of Buddhism, so not the super deep teachings. And I've studied the conscious and subconscious a little bit through Bob Proctor and others with Heidi, but I've never heard this concept before. Was this something that you came up with on your own?
No, I studied it in Buddhism. I've been studying Buddhism for I'm going to say 35 years now. So, yeah, and it's a common practice. I think when Buddhism came over to North America, a lot of it got watered down based on North Americans' lack of discipline. Like even meditation, it's not what we call meditation here. They laugh at over there because it's just not, doesn't have the rigor that they have over there. And it's okay. Like, you meditate and you do what you want to do. But if you really want to get the results that your body is capable of, like, we're here to fulfill our potential. And so if there's parts of the mind that we're not using, why not? Like it would be like going to the gym and just working on one arm. It's kind of like, it doesn't make any sense. So if we're only using this tiny small fraction of our brain or our mind, we've got a lot of potential in there that we can fulfill. And so the Buddhist studies go they have super lengthy and detailed extravaganzas about about each, how the mind works and how you can get it to work better. Meditation is just like one tiny part of it.
So
But
the meditation is one part, Patricia.
mm,
How how did you train yourself? Was it literally for you the meditation, or how did you train yourself to catch those thoughts?
well, I think the meditation helps because you have this tiny little part of the conscious mind, and then as you meditate, you kind of dissolve that analytical mind in between, and then you get to know what's happening in the subconscious mind more and more as you meditate. But for me, when I'm instructing people who are sick, that's too slow. So we use different methods to speed up that transition of um, deprogramming, if you will, what the mind's tendencies naturally are, and reprogramming it with some pretty hot stuff from the world of qigong. So the meditation does start to slowly reveal the subconscious mind. So then you can start to make some changes in your everyday life, like your behaviors, your beliefs, um, your tendencies, based on what's revealed through meditation.
Mm.
So I think that helps a lot. But then when you start to, outside of the meditation, like off the cushion is what they would say, start to pay attention to what your mind is doing. Like what I instruct people to do is set their smartwatch or something, like, or their phone every 50 minutes, like 50 minutes, and then just catch what they're thinking. I wandered around for like 3 years. What am I thinking now? 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 And it does reveal itself. Like, how could I be so negative every 50 minutes or every 5 minutes or whatever it is? But it's an opportunity to do something about it. So the more you notice it, the more opportunities you have to rectify it
So
and get better
Patricia,
results.
okay, is it like, so you're basically shining a flashlight into your thoughts, right? I mean, so you're saying, like, what I'm hearing is like you're not really doing anything. You're becoming more aware, correct?
Yes. And
Okay.
then the doing part is the stopping of the thoughts. And then
Okay.
most people think that they have to replace them with something, but that's not accurate. So again, that's a North American thing. That's not an Eastern philosophy thing at all.
So
So
what about redirecting so that, I mean, is redirection like, instead of somebody who's caught in a negative, let's just say hypnotic loop, right? Or rhythm. What if they're like, well, I don't know my passion, and then they figure out like their passion, and then they kind of redirect and like, whoa, I really want to do this and do this in my life. That's not like replacing, that's more of like turning the ship.
yeah, in that case though, Heidi, don't you think that's a realization rather than a redirection?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so.
So that's
So,
that's the same thing that I was
oh
talking
yeah.
about too. So every time you find a pattern of thought, it's a new realization, a new awareness. Yeah.
Right.
Because your
Okay.
purpose never hides from you. Your passions never hide from you. We mostly hide from them because we've got
Wow.
other things in the way.
So you love how she talks. You're so awesome. Your purpose never hides from you. That is so brilliant.
How Patricia, did you describe stopping those thoughts? You said that you just kind of have a verbal command, not
Yeah.
verbal, I guess it would be a mental command of like no or stop, or what what do you teach other people and how to stop those thoughts?
I say pretty much the same thing. You can have the conversation with your thought because you're not your thoughts. You're either the commander or the watcher of your thoughts, or oblivious to your thoughts, but you aren't your thoughts. So they're a thing that happens within you. They're not you. So once you start to watch them, then you'll start to notice them, and then you can just say no. It's just like, teaching a dog how to sit. They'll come back, or they won't sit the first time. So you have no, 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 no. And I do that a lot. No, 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 no.
I know a Buddhist master, and he says he says cut disconnect
Oh, yeah.
so he uses a hand motion too to like disconnect.
Whatever it is that works for you is what I say to do. Like if
Yeah.
the word no works, if the word stop works,
Mm.
if the word, FU works, whatever it is,
Yeah.
to make it strong enough. And then you get so good at it too, you guys. You can stop it. You can stop a thought when it's kind of partially the way through, and then it doesn't have a chance to complete. And then you can get so good at it that you can stop it, but when you feel it coming, like you can feel the sensation of that thought before it even forms. So when you get practiced at it, you can get really good at interrupting even before it's formed.
Okay, so something I was thinking about was swirling when you were just talking is that, okay, so I just ran into somebody and they were talking in a way, how do I explain this? They were using like, I have this like disease or I have this ailment. Let's just pick on ADHD or whatever. And they're claiming that like
Yeah,
as if it's their own, right? So
yeah,
so so anybody who's listening to this podcast, like if you're walking around and in your, like, do you say the hypnotic rhythm thing? Is that something that yeah. So you're in
yeah,
the hypnotic rhythm and you're looping these thoughts and you're like, I have ADHD, therefore I can't do this, or I have whatever it is, I blah blah. That's the thought that you're saying, like, this is the awareness and this is where you're catching yourself, right?
yeah. That's it. Anything that you say that I am, like, or my cancer, first
Yeah.
of all, the mind loves ownership. So anything
Mm,
that you claim, it's gonna go, yes, let's hang on to that baby. But as soon as you claim something, you claim the limits that come with it.
mm,
So even remember in our leadership class, Heidi, when they
mhm,
said, name all the things that you want to be,
mhm.
and just claim that, those things aren't big enough because they still have limits too.
Sure.
So I ditched mine as soon as the class was over because uh, even though even though it was big for me at the time, it's not big enough.
Yeah,
You know?
same.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm totally there with you. We were
Yeah.
so destined to be together in that because I mean,
Totally.
yeah, it
That
was
was the best thing ever. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I always say like what's the best part of that leadership program was like I got to be friends with Patricia.
That's what I say too. Yes, I
Really?
got I got
Aw.
Heidi. Yeah.
Aw. And you weren't like when we first got together in like this little room, this is like side note. Patricia was like, "Oh my God, I have to be a partner with this crazy blonde woman."
Yeah, I just thought, you were so happy and, all sparkly and everything. And I thought, oh, blonde and and then I found out the depth that you have, which was
Aw.
so delicious and gracious. And yeah,
Aw.
yeah, perfect.
And
Perfect. We
yeah.
were perfect buddies.
Totally. And I, like, and I first met you and I was like, I was just so curious. I'm like, who is this woman? And then you tell me all this stuff. You're like, I'm a Qigong master. It's not how you talk, but like you're a Qigong master and I have a ranch and I have horses. And I was like, what? Like, this is an amazing, incredible human. And yeah, this is why you're on the podcast. We want to share you with all of our people too. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so let's go back into what we were talking about because
Well,
this is really
well, I think
fascinating.
the important thing about what you two were just talking about is something that I did in the past, and it was challenging for me at the time to do the work to pay the money that I paid, and I obtained a certification. It was ended up being a life coaching certification. I thought it was going to be a biohacking certification. It ended up not being that, even though that's what it was marketed as. And so I went through the program, and at the end, I've probably never once used that certification. And I don't even list it as one of the things that I did or obtained. But the benefit were the people that I met and the relationships that I built from there. It completely changed the direction of my life by
Wow.
taking that program. So to me, the certifications and the programs we end up taking, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm never taking another certification or doing another program again, the benefits aren't the piece of paper that says you took the class or whatever it was. It's like the benefits are how you changed yourself and the relationships you built within that you take away. And those things alone can change your life forever. And they're invaluable. And it's not the piece of paper that most people think they want that you're really getting out of it.
For sure. So that's probably,
Perfectly said.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
probably a really good segue into like, would you talk a little bit around that, Patricia, and how Because that's one of the things that really stood out to me when I first met you. You're like, I'll never forget that. You're like, I don't want all that stuff because it would get in my way of actually serving people.
Yeah. First of all, I think a lot of people go certification crazy because they're searching for their own significance. It's a significance, validation for them. Secondly, a lot of those certifications, I'm not going to say all of them because there are some that are just outstanding, but a lot of them are, what's a good word for that? They certainly don't measure up to the work I want to do.
Mm.
And the other thing too is most people who are looking for somebody who's certified don't see what's beyond the certification. They letters or pieces of paper or something like that. That's all they see. They don't see really what the program is. And so if you're just signing up with somebody to work with somebody who's certified, I'm going to say chances are you're going to be disappointed if they have a certification that you want. I've I've looked at working with a lot of people who are certified in this or that, and they just don't measure up. That's all there is to it. I mean, they've gone to get the certification, they've done all the book work, but they haven't done the real work that makes them valuable or valuable enough for me to work with. That's for sure. So and then here in Canada, if I was going to get licensed as a specialty doc in traditional Chinese medicine, there are more things that I can't do legally than I can do. Like the only thing I'd be allowed to do as a licensed practitioner is like acupuncture, and I'd have to have a clinic with so many beds and so many employees, and that's how strict it is. But you can't work in the hospital, you can't do this, you can't do that. So as somebody who has decided not to get licensed, I can share my story, and I can share how I got my own results, and that's perfectly legal. But if I got licensed, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, it goes back to that license thing we were talking about in our
Well, yeah,
thing too. There's so many layers to this.
if you look up the legal definition, now Canada's fairly similar to the US, but it's a crown country, so it has some slight nuances to it. But if you look up a lot of words when we're talking about licenses and certifications, they have legal definitions that dictate how they can be used. And if you look the legal definition up of a license, the actual definition is something for which without a license would be illegal. So think about like in the US, like a fishing license, like, oh, I have to go get my fishing license. Well, that means fishing is illegal and you have to get permission from the state in order to go fishing. And then there's all these rules associated with it, where in the past we could go forage, we could collect some fish for our family or whatever it was. Now we need to have state approval to allow us to go to the water and to put our fishing line in and catch a fish for dinner. So I can see like in Canada the same, like when you obtain this license, you're signing up for all the rules that the state requires you to follow, and you're putting yourself under their jurisdiction. And in many cases, like people think that there's good reasons for that, oh, we're protecting against, charlatans and quacks, because those are the terms people like to throw around for alternative medicine, when in fact, if anyone cares to look into like the whole history of the Flexner report and how the Rockefellers put all these alternative schools, universities out of business,
Yes.
because they wanted to use their own Rockefeller petroleum in pharmaceuticals. And therefore they hired one of the Flexner brothers, actually both Flexner brothers, to go out and create this whole system that we have today. Not that that system is absolutely bad, because for emergency medicine and other things, there's a purpose for it, but these alternatives have gone to the wayside. And now they fall under these licenses that don't even allow the alternative practitioners to do what would look like curing and helping other people. So often we overlook them. And so I love that you're working outside of that, Patricia. And I mean, do you have any comments on what I just said, or any additional things that I missed there that are really important to you?
you know your history, that's for sure. That's spot on for sure, what's happened and how medicine in particular has been directed. And so I think too, in addition to that, there's a lot of grooming that goes on, so that when you get sick, then you go see this person and they give you something like, something to do with your sickness, ideally. And so we have this kind of program that I get this illness, and then I get this, treatment. We can't even call it a cure because mostly it's not. Instead of, I've got this thing, what the heck caused it? Why do I have it? So we even start off like over this 100 years of grooming that we've had, via this modern, medical system. We've learned how to not ask the right questions. So we ask, what can I take? I get this every single day. I've got this. What do you recommend? I recommend, reversing it, whatever it is. But you have to start with the right questions. Like, why do I have it? That's one of the things that really pickled my brain when I was sick is, I used to be a top athlete. And so how did I get sick? Like, I had a great diet. So if diet and exercise are the thing, I fulfilled all those things, and yet I'm still sick and I'm dying. So like, what, why? And the doctor said, well, it just happens sometimes. Well, that's not an answer. There should be people who know how this happens, and they're not even taught that in medical school. I mean, it's bizarre that doctors are not trained in healing. They're trained in disease and medicine. They have no idea about healing.
A lot of
All of
times
my
they a lot of times they call it disease management. So it's like
Yeah,
they're just going to manage it forever,
yes.
but not reverse it. Okay, sorry, go
That's
on.
right. That's right. And even like when I was sick, they at the beginning they said, it might take us a couple of tries to get the medications and everything correct, and nothing worked. So like I was in there for about the 12th try on all of those things, and I said to the doc, I'm getting pretty excited now because we must be getting close to this combination of things that you said would work. And he said, what do you mean work? And I said, well, make me better. And he said, well, you're not getting better. We're just going to keep on doing these yeah, you're not
Oh
getting
my
better.
gosh.
You're just going to keep on doing these surgeries and give you, throw these medicines at you until your body can't take it anymore. That's what he said.
Wow.
That's medicine 101. Yeah.
And that's in Canada, right?
That's in
Or is that,
Canada.
yeah,
That's in
okay.
Canada. Yeah.
So Patricia, what is the cause of most disease?
That is it, that whole chemical reaction that happens as we respond in our everyday lives. And because it's oriented to be 70% negative, we get 70% negative information, causing our cells to downgrade their operations and downgrade when they replicate. So and when it happens over years, that's why we have, sickness in aging populations, because they've had all these decades to downgrade all of their cells and muck up all of their internal organs just from that. Never mind, the food pollution that we have, and everybody hating where they work, or almost everybody hating where they work, all of that stuff piled on the body. So that is one of the major contributors to disease. Outweighs diet and exercise by a long shot, outweighs environmental toxins by a long shot. Yeah, that
Yeah,
is it. and
I
and if you can just change that by 3%, you can change your health in a dramatic way.
oh wow. See, that's really big. So I would say that most people listening to this are going to love this idea. And also most people listening to this are not going to do what you're talking about. Like
Yeah. No,
like they're
most
not,
people won't do it.
Yeah.
yeah. And so why, I mean, I'm thinking about this and I'm like, even for me, like I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I know that like deep down that resonates with me as being true.
Mhm.
And the more that I've studied, like I've studied decades, like I have my master's in holistic nutrition. I studied this stuff inside and out. And that's where Heidi and I have come to, is that emotions play one of the most important, like your self-talk and your emotions
Mhm.
dictate what happens to your body. And at the end of the day, like all dis-ease has some, if not 100% emotional component.
Absolutely.
And if you even look from a scientific standpoint, so a lot of people don't hear about this in the science, even though it's all scientific, if you want to take it that way.
Yeah.
at our base level, we're all made up of cells. And at the base, every cell is made up of atoms. And who has ever heard of an atom aging? And so if
Yes.
we're just made up of atoms, like we should never age, but yet we do. And so we must be directing that ourselves in some way based on our mind.
Well, I think there's going to be life and death in nature, and we're part of nature, so that is a thing. But do we have to do it as poorly as we currently do? And I think the answer, I think it's being proven more and more that we don't.
Mhm.
So why won't the people listening to this, the majority of them, do this work? Is it because they're not sick enough to be called to it?
Partially, there's a few reasons. First of all, everybody's on their own growth path and their own level of awareness, so there's that. We've had 100 years of grooming now, Rockefeller grooming, for the medical system that we have, and it's massive. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep doing it. And then there is this level of passivity that the human being enjoys. Like they want stuff to befall them instead of to work towards something. That's a natural tendency for most people. So I think most people do have to have that massive wake up call. For me, it was that 3 to 6 months to live. Like, okay,
That's a wake up call.
I have nothing to lose here.
Right. Oh my God.
So yeah, I think there's a bunch of things playing. That whole Rockefeller movement knows exactly how this works. They already know what they're doing, and they've known this. Like this has been known for 5,000 years. I don't know how long they've known it, but they knew it at the beginning of this whole medical revolution that we went through 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They wanted to rely on their own monopolistic way of treating.
Yeah. And if
anything.
you want to see somebody that's good at programming minds,
I know.
you have them.
It's incredible.
It is
There's
incredible.
entire podcasts if people are interested on just the history of medicine, and it's worth just about anyone who's alive today listening to that, because we're all subject, especially in the corporate world, to the Rockefeller medicine. And again, while like emergency medicine is great, keeping people well is not what we do. And it's not taught, and it's not able to be done with the system that we have called modern medicine or mainstream medicine. So
You're correct. 100% correct.
It takes something else, and it takes like some of the things you're talking about, Patricia. So for somebody, like, we've got a lot of people that work in the corporate world, and we've got a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the podcast, and all of them want to be healthier. Like no doubt, everyone wants to be healthier. So I think like it's pretty easy to do what you're saying. It's not like it's simple that somebody has to spend time, invest time, and they have to slow down, and they have to become like the spiritual self watching what's going on in this physical avatar to catch some of these things. But the work itself isn't like something that you have to study and take forever. I think it helps to work with a practitioner like yourself to do something like this, and to know like, okay, here's my issue. How do I go from A to Z? But like, what could somebody do tomorrow to kind of start the process?
I would say watch your thoughts. Like set your timer or set your clock or your phone or something to every 50 minutes, and then ask yourself, what was I thinking right then when that went off? And if it was even remotely negative, which mostly it will be, I guarantee you, then start practicing shutting that negative thought down. And then you can start, moving that timer up to 45 minutes, 40 minutes, so that you're catching yourself more often. And then you'll be able to feel, I think it's average about 3 weeks when people start to feel like they're making a difference, if they're doing it correctly, and not skipping a week because it's so tiring. Because it is tiring at the beginning, because nobody's really used to, paying attention to what they think. They just think automatically and act automatically and believe automatically without question or observation or analysis about, is this going to work out for me really well? Most people feel entitled to think negatively. Like, I hate spaghetti because my mother force-fed spaghetti on me when I was 3 years old, and they'll hang on to that as if it's like a badge of honor. It's ridiculous. So if you don't analyze, like, why the heck am I hanging on to this old spaghetti story from 3 years old? It's going to continue to percolate. It's going to continue to be on repeat, and it's going to continue to destroy your body.
Mm.
So just stopping yourself and thinking, like, what is it that I'm thinking? Ask what you're thinking, analyze what you're thinking, and do it increasingly frequently. You'll notice a difference in your body.
And you use qigong and hypnotherapy practices in your practice as well, Patricia?
I don't do hypnotherapy anymore
Oh, you don't?
because so there's a pocket of people that I can't work with, and people who have been diagnosed with a psychotic illness or epilepsy, because of the way the brainwave changes when you're doing the hypnotic therapy stuff, it can trigger an unwanted event.
Oh, really?
People are sneaking through who have these diagnoses. So I don't. Yes.
Really?
So they lie and tell me that they haven't had these. So I stopped doing them just because of liability reasons. So I just do something else. There's a cool qigong thing that we can do, which does change the brainwave pattern, but it's in a more gentle manner, and it's kind of an overtime thing.
Wow.
It's super powerful.
Now, are you, I think I've asked you this before, maybe on another podcast, but do you have a PMA that you operate under?
Private Membership Association.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So some people are, instead of an LLC or other types of businesses, there's another entity, and I don't like calling them entities,
Yes,
I
an
suppose.
entity.
I guess they're dead entities, not living, and that's how they do business. But
Okay.
private membership associations.
Yeah.
No.
A lot of people in Canada and the US are doing that to practice things that are helpful but aren't able to be licensed.
Yeah. So I don't practice medicine, and I don't diagnose disease. So that's where my legal boundaries are.
That's right.
My disclaimer is that everything that I say, I can't guarantee results, and it's for entertainment purposes only.
Oh, right.
So all I do is share what worked for me and what my story was.
Nice. Yeah, that's perfect. And I
Yeah.
think can you talk about some success stories? Because it seems like, based on what I hear from Heidi, like and that's why you're so successful in what you do, is you were able to solve your own problem and people are seeking you out. So you must have had some pretty big successes with the people you're working with.
Yeah, I've had significant successes. One of my first like big ones was this lady who's an RN. She had inflammatory breast cancer, and they told her that they could do chemotherapy and get her another 2 years maybe. So she's an RN. She has access to the best medical advice and medical specialists in the world, and they told her she has a couple of years left. I think at the time she was in her 40s. So we worked together for a few months, and she started to feel the difference right away. So now we're like 15 years later, and she's happily retired and spending time with her husband and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then, yeah. And so just last year, worked with an oncologist, 4th stage cancer. And so now he's on his way to having no cancer markers. It's just been a steady improvement since.
So
we
you worked with a
working.
cancer doctor
What?
to help him with his own issue that he couldn't solve.
I thought you were saying he was working with an oncologist.
No, he is an oncologist. Yeah. So all of my one-on-one clients this year are doctors and dentists. I don't have any lay people yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
So I've got all these things, but one of the things that you had said is, taking ownership over these thoughts of like, I want to hold on to this awful thought of this thing that happened to me, and because it becomes a part of me, and it's this negative part, and it becomes part of your identity, and that needs to be, I guess the way I look at it, not sure if it's different from the way you look at it, but it's like you need to alchemize that thought into something that's different. And whether it's, in your case, just getting rid of the negative thought altogether and allowing the joy to bubble up, or taking that thought in and saying, this is part of what built me as who I am today, and I can let go of the negative associations with it.
That
That's
works too. Yeah. I think a lot, forgiveness is like a huge deal because it's kind of like a visceral cellular release of caca that you've been hanging on to forever. I mean, I'm guilty of that for sure. And so learning how to let go of those things, because like you said, Thaddeus, that's the stuff that made you. I had a horrible childhood, but that's why I can do what I do now. So had I not had that, I wouldn't have been able to translate it into helping other people who have had terrible childhoods. And I get the stories, I can tell you, but now I get the stories. I don't hear the stories and go, oh, you poor thing. I hear the stories and I think, what is that going to build for you once you can do the work of forgiveness and let go of that visceral pain that's keeping you trapped. So I see the stories in a little bit different way, but had I not had my own horrible story, I don't think I'd be able to do that.
Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit of like kind of how you were raised, Patricia, just to give some?
Sure. Both of my parents were addicts. Both of them were horrifically violent. And so it was like growing up in a war zone, and there was no sense of safety or security. There was no sense of love or anything. You just didn't know when the next thing was going to get hurled at you, or when the next beating was going to come. I think I was hit every day until I was 16 years old. So and then my being addicts, my parents weren't really, that was their priority, is to feed their addictions. So when I was 16 years old, my brother was 12. We were in danger of being evicted from our house because my parents couldn't and wouldn't work. So I was going to school full time, and I was working full time to keep a roof over our heads as a kid. So it was kind of like that.
Wow, that gives you a lot of grit and a lot to alchemize and forgive, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? A lot of people that come, want to raise their frequency and do some coaching with me. Like most of them have childhoods that are pretty, detrimental or whatever. I don't want to even say that because it's like, look at what happened, with your life. Like it's just everybody's journey too. So it gives us a semblance. Maybe go ahead.
So I always say to people that come and talk about their childhood, which most people have terrible childhoods because that's how all this programming gets sunk into them, is in their childhood. So if nothing happens by accident, why was that brought to me? Yeah. Like, why was that brought to you? Why was that brought to me? And so if it's going to serve a purpose, ought we not to get onto what that purpose might be?
I love how she talks. You're so awesome.
So with that, Patricia, I mean, this is amazing. You had said something in the beginning that you help people and you want us to fulfill our potential. Mm-hmm. So we talked about like the mindset and the sort of states that we program ourselves into, these dis-ease states. So what else do we do to fulfill our potential? Like, what else do you either teach or coach, or what else do you want to convey to people listening to this on, like, how else do we fulfill our potential, and what else can we be doing?
Okay. So mostly I work with people who are ill. And so if people are ill predominantly because they're responding to their everyday lives in a certain way that's feeding their cells in a way that's downgrading them, etc., what areas are the most predominant way in which we respond? And by predominant, I mean what has the biggest impact on us emotionally and thoughtfully in our everyday lives. And so there's 12 key areas: the mind, the emotions, energy, the body, which comes last in that quadrangle, money, relationships, work, which we talked about already. Like if 85% of people hate their job, like that's crushing, and you go to it every single day, how can you then arrange your life so that you're doing what the Buddhists call right work?
Mhm.
so that you're fulfilled instead of, making yourself dead early. Um, and then your environment, which includes like how you spend your time. Are you learning? Are you traveling? Are you enjoying your space and your house? And is everything being refreshed and new every once in a while? And then your purpose, of course. Everybody has a purpose, and it's almost it can be easy to kind of pull that thread from your entire life that has been leading you to your purpose for the entire time. And then the state that you walk around in. Like I used to walk around in a state that was pretty, protective, I would say, cautious, yeah, which is exactly the opposite of what it should be. It should be open and fluid and happy and curious and, forward moving and
Mm.
that kind of thing.
Is
So
that is that part of the Buddhist wheel, the 12? Isn't there 12? Isn't there something with the Buddhist wheel?
I know there's the Eightfold Path. So
Yep.
that's, right speech and right
Livelihood.
work and right thought and
Yeah, I
right.
know. Yeah, I've heard of that, but what you're saying, because you said 12, so I was just curious if there was something else. I thought I
Well,
remembered
it might be
something.
from Buddhism. It's from the Qigong piece.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and
Okay.
Qigong is based in Buddhism. So it
Right.
could well
Okay.
be. Yeah.
Okay. I just remember something in art history about the wheel, and there was 12
Could,
spokes or something. So
it could well be.
perhaps,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't
Okay.
remember that one, but
But you
that
follow
doesn't
the
mean
eight.
anything.
Do you follow the Eightfold Path and like the WESEC festival that's coming up and that
Okay.
kind of stuff?
Cool.
No. My question was, do
Oh,
you follow the Eightfold Path, Patricia, and
I
WESEC?
I do my best to follow the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
I'm I'm not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then do you celebrate like in Buddhist, festivals and WESAC and
I
none of
don't.
that? No.
No.
Okay.
No. I celebrate every day
Yeah.
at home.
You're so awesome.
So what you were saying is like fulfilling your true potential comes with these 12 essential practices of getting
Right.
these right.
Thanks for reminding me to get
Yeah.
back on track.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
am I fulfilling myself mentally? Like, am I fulfilling, all of my mental capabilities? Am I fulfilling all my emotional capabilities? Like, am I protected or am I open? Can I, risk being vulnerable and true in the face of everybody that wants me to be something else? Am I fulfilling, my potential for energy in my body? Like what kind of energy is it moving? Is it moving freely? Am I blocking it with, mental and emotional things? Am I fulfilling the potential of my body? Like, am I moving it? And am I aware of what's going on in it? Like you can get so aware of what's going on. You guys know this anyway. You can get so aware of what's going on in your body that you can notice a change before it can even show up on test results that you get at the doctor's office. So in that way, and exercise wise and movement wise and flexibility and suppleness, am I fulfilling the potential of my body? Am I fulfilling the potential of my earnings, like my money and my wealth and how I manage that and the ease with which I manage that and the responsibility that goes with it? Am I fulfilling my potential with my work? Most people want their work to be provided by somebody else. But when you can make the switch from like consuming somebody else's idea of your work to producing your own idea of your work, which you guys know anyway, because that's what you're doing, it's a whole new ballgame, and it requires something of you that people who want their job provided don't even know they have. So am I fulfilling my potential in my relationships? My primary relationship with my husband, my relationship with my family, like my primary family, my friends, and even my animals. Am I fulfilling my end of the bargain with them? And on throughout the entire list.
I, I would love to do a whole podcast with you sometime, like
Okay.
just on right livelihood, because I think so many people
Yes.
are striving for this, but they have no idea where to even start. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. And it sounds like you're well studied in that and have thought about it. And we got a really good conversation around right livelihood.
For sure.
I
Yeah.
think when you were saying some of these things about family and your relationships, we were just talking to a gentleman today. We just met him for the first time, but he said, do you know when people started changing the way they interact and having less significant time with their family, their significant other, their work, and their personal friendships? And we were like, oh, I don't know, in like the 90s with Nintendo and video games. And he's like, he said 2007, because that's when everyone started to get a smartphone.
Yeah.
And it has become this device that sort of divides because we can only see what we want to see, and isolates us because we can always get what we want at any time we want it and be entertained.
Yeah.
And these devices, while they give us what we think we want, they're not fulfilling what we should be. And they're, in my opinion, they're part of what's distracting us from our purpose, because we're investing so much time and attention to this, what I like to call the black scrying screen, instead of what our purpose is in healing ourselves and our relationships and in the natural world. So
Yeah, I think that's one of those key triggers though. Am I being passive in this area of my life? So if I'm staring at my screen, I'm consuming, I'm being passive, I'm not creating something of value. So you have to decide, and everybody gets to decide, is this going to be my life, or am I going to produce something that's of value to somebody else? So
that's powerful.
yeah.
I feel like the answer to that in most people's cases is like they're going to choose the phone. I mean,
Yeah.
you just go to the airport and I'm like, everybody is choosing the phone.
Mhm.
And so do you see like maybe in the future there'll be some kind of divide between like tech people and people that are want to go back to nature or back to something else? I'm curious what you think of that.
I'm not sure what I foresee, but what I am sure of is if I'm producing something of value, that might invite somebody else to see that and produce something else that they foresee that has value. When you give an invitation to somebody, you only get to do the giving part. You don't get to do the receiving part. So how they receive that invitation is their business. And so what I can foresee is those people that are going to be glued to their phone are not going to reach their potential. They're not going to reach fulfillment in their lives. There's always going to be something, and probably they're going to end up with some kind of sickness.
So well put. Mic drop. We're done here.
We are at the end of the podcast here for our hour with you, Patricia. And I just want to give you one more question, and then have you tell everybody where they can find you, interact with you, and find your work. So our last question is, why don't you work a corporate job? Did you ever work a corporate job, and why don't you work one today?
I did. Let's see, why don't I work one today? Okay, just to be real, I don't suffer poor leadership well. And so so I would be the poorest employee that anybody ever had because of that. A lot of people get into a leadership position without the leadership abilities to manage it. So I can't do that.
I love that.
Sounds familiar.
It sounds very familiar.
I'm unemployable.
Yes, I am unemployable. Yes.
Yeah. I seem to surround myself with people that are unemployable. That my other friend was Shayla. She says the same thing. I'm like, I knew I love you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I like unemployable people because I don't like, people that are followers are on a different frequency. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely.
And so if you're not leading your own life, it doesn't even matter if you're in a corporate leadership position or not. If you're not leading your own life with some vigor, then we're on a different frequency.
Yeah, definitely. And there's hope, like there's ways to move out of those places too. And it's like, if this is calling to you and you're hearing this on the podcast right now and you're like, whoa, like, what can I do? What would be the first thing, like you would say to somebody who's just literally just waking up from that? Like, I can change at my job and keep my job. What would you say?
I did double duty and triple duty for a long time.
Okay.
So, so I had a corporate job working for healthcare, no less. And I started to flip commercial buildings. And I owned an auto body shop, and I did what I'm doing now.
Oh my gosh.
And she has a ranch.
And I have a
Like,
ranch.
what? Like, who are you?
I'm somebody who wants to fulfill my potential in
Yeah.
all these areas. Yeah. I don't succeed all the time. So you have to, prepare for failure. And, failure is just learning. So, what do they say? Prepare to suck. So I've done a lot of sucking in my life. So
I think that's where most
I
people get
love that.
afraid. People get afraid of like, I'm afraid to fail, so I won't do anything. And I think the entrepreneurs and the people that show true leadership, they're willing to do the work. So I see people that are willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
They're willing to work a little harder, potentially in the short term or medium term,
Yep.
to get the benefits. You can't work 80 hours a week all the time forever. Like it just doesn't
No,
work.
no.
But entrepreneurs are willing to take ownership, to take some risks, and to go after what they want. And often what we find is we don't succeed every time, but we find what we want and we find a way to succeed on our own terms.
Yeah.
And even within a corporation, you can do that. It's what I did. I had to leave 4 corporations and take a pay cut every time to get what I wanted, but I got what I knew I wanted within the corporation. I don't know that that's going to be what keeps me in the corporation forever. I think I'm at the point of being unemployable and somehow they keep me around, which has been okay for now.
Yeah.
But I think that advice to people is so helpful. So we could keep talking. I want to be respectful of your time. I would love to do another podcast on right livelihood.
Yep. I have it written
Yeah,
down.
let's do that.
It's called Right Livelihood plus the bear story, because
Oh.
we didn't get to the bear story, and I really want to share that because it's a really powerful, energetic thing. So I think it'll go really good with the right livelihood. So inviting you back again with both of those
I'd love to come back.
teasers.
That would
Okay,
be so
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
Okay, Patricia, please tell everybody where they can find you. And if you have contact info that you want people to have, you can feel free to give that out now as well. Otherwise, just your websites and socials or anything else you want people to find you from.
Yeah, so it's just patricialoff.com. Couldn't be any easier. And I have a Facebook page, Patricia Loff Therapy, I think it's called, and on Instagram. And info at patricialoff.com if anybody wants to pop me an email. I answer every email still. So yeah, that's about it. patricialoff.com. And I've just switched over platforms, so not all the programs are up yet, but they will be within the next couple of weeks.
Awesome.
Perfect. By the time this goes live, they'll all be up.
Yep.
Okay.
And when she's saying her last name, it's Loff.
2 Fs.
Yep.
Thanks,
2
Heidi.
Fs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patricia, this was so much fun. Thank you so
you.
much for being here and sharing your
Thank you.
story.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys.
Yeah,
So good to
yeah.
talk to you and see you.
Perfect.
So great to see you. Well, can't wait to see you again.